Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 100. Well, we did it, folks. We reached 100. We can shut it all down now.
Oh, God. Is that what's happening? Oh,
No.
I wasn't prepared.
It's a nice round number. It's a wonderful thing. And this episode, we are doing something that Matt and I have wanted to do for a very long time. And we have very special guests today. Our wives.
Yes, our incredible spouses are joining us, the incredible Sarah Storm and Sarah Moonen, the Sarahs, as y'all know. Do each of you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do?
Hey, I'm Sarah Moonen. I'm Geoff's spouse. I am a business executive, and I game as much as I am able.
Hey, I'm Sarah Storm. I'm Matt's spouse. I'm a podcast producer and a performer, and I game on my phone mostly. I love games in theory, but I don't play them in practice, like the serious games, as much as I might like.
Well, it doesn't have to be serious games. I have been playing a lot of games on my phone, or I've been playing like a lot of 1 or 2 games on my phone in lockdown right now. So, well, it's gaming.
I have admitted to myself that even some of the intentionally addictive phone games in quarantine are legit. Like, and it's okay to spend money. I'm like, oh, so a video game costs X number of dollars. So if I spend under that to play these silly phone games, it's still legit.
Geoff and I actually had a conversation a couple of months back about how it's very interesting to me that people who play phone games don't consider themselves gamers in the same way that someone who sits at a console and plays does. But I think that people who play phone games often invest more time than someone who's in a console does, and that there's a lot of you are still a gamer for playing phone games, even if it's just Candy Crush or the stupid, I have the game where I make bubbles and pop them. I don't know. It's very soothing.
I've been playing Homescapes, which like I hate love it. Like it's super dumb. No offense to the developers. It's a goofy game, but like it's satisfying. It's like it's totally just the serotonin. I feel like a very adorable mouse in the maze, like punching the button for the treat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Geoff and I have always said on the podcast that phone games are games. If you play games, you're a gamer. Like, there's no rules. And like, at least on this podcast, I can't speak for all of the gaming space as it is toxic like any other space. You shouldn't judge the player by what they're playing. Whatever they want to play, whatever they experience, whatever they enjoy, that makes them a gamer, whatever the hell that means.
And it gives us joy wherever it is. I mean, my recent obsession is a Final Fantasy gacha game that I can either choose to do menus on the battles, or I can have it auto run. And the fact that the numbers go up and things drop, and I level up this character, and now they have it's basically, anime fantasy character management simulator, but it just makes me happy. And how can that be bad?
I just want to shout out the classic. I've been playing Tetris for like most of my life, I guess. And there's no plot, there are no characters, but it is just the most satisfying thing. It's really super satisfying as somebody who has to organize a lot of stuff. Like you get the little dopamine hit every time you successfully put the things away, and it just makes me very happy.
So I agree with that. Although after watching like Tetris Grandmasters do things that I didn't realize were possible with the game, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm Tetrising wrong.
Tell me more, please.
Oh, goodness. Geoff could probably tell you better than I can. There are people who play invisible Tetris who know what the next block is that's coming and play it at like 50,000 times speed. I don't know how to explain it, but it is amazing, and you should definitely watch it.
There was a series of releases of Tetris. Like there was like an arcade release in Japan that was like, okay, this is difficult. And then arcade gamers got so good at it that like Tetris the Grandmasters is actually a series of Tetris arcade or Sega Genesis or whatever titles that came out, that it just like every iteration of it had a more absolutely insane, like Sarah said, invisible blocks. You see the little thing to the side what the next one is, but you don't see it fall, so you just know where to drop it.
Oh,
things like this. There is a mode where you win not by clearing a set number of lines, but by dropping blocks so it makes a specific shape.
Wow.
All of this stuff, Yeah, it's wild.
I'm making a happy face.
Yeah.
Nobody can see that.
It's funny, Sarah, that you bring up your earliest game experience and one of your favorite classics. I'm curious what both of you remember as your earliest game experience. I know my Sarah's. And by the way, Geoff and I are probably going to unconsciously just refer to a Sarah, so good luck.
I was wondering how that was going to work.
We can identify ourselves. If we're about to have like a thesis statement or a major thing, I can be like, this is Sarah Storm.
I, Geoff Moonen of Sound, Mind, and Body, started my...
Well, no, but so this is... Let's for a second, I'm going to take this to the podcasting space for a hot second. Like, this is a legit issue when you have a show with more than one guest, especially if their voices are of a similar timbre or any of that stuff, like helping an audience decipher who's there. And this is Sarah Storm, by the way. Like, it's a thing, right? Like, and I nerd out about the ways that people, it's not a game, but it is gaming in the sense of like, how do you problem solve and get the reward? Like, what's the best path and solution through?
Yes,
anyway.
Mostly I was being a jackass to our listeners because I know a lot of them. But, obviously we will differentiate.
Hi, this is Sarah Storm, Matt's spouse. I'm very earnest and I take things deeply literally and quite seriously.
This is Geoff. I'm regularly on the show, and I'd like to point out that this is a time when the redheads are outnumbering Matt. And I know that's
oh my God.
on video, but...
One of us.
This has come up in that thing of like, okay, no, my wife is Sarah, Matt's wife is Sarah, with an H or without an H, both with an H. What are identifying things about them? They're both redheads. So.
Clearly, Geoff and I have a type. It's fine.
It's okay, and your spouses love each other too, so it works out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
Exactly.
But let's start with Sarah Moonen. So what is the earliest gaming memory that you have? The first thing you remember playing?
So the first thing I remember playing is Super Mario Brothers 3, but as part of Super Mario All-Stars on the Super NES. I had a babysitter who was the coolest babysitter because she came over and showed me that you could do crazy things like go behind white blocks and find whistles and do all kind, like she knew all the secrets in Super Mario Brothers 3. And my mom would be like, all right, we're going to go out. I'm like, is Morgan coming to babysit? Oh, no, it's Karen. Okay. Could you get Morgan next time, please? And I'm like, I don't know, 6, 8, something like that. And that's my earliest like gaming memory that I remember. But also anytime we were in a car, my parents didn't want us to talk to them or bother them in any way. I know they're never going to listen to this podcast, so it's really fine. So I had a Game Boy, the old school original Game Boy, except I wouldn't get it until they made the black one with the pink writing because I was convinced that it was finally for girls. So I had a lot of work to do there. But when they came out with the black Game Boy with the pink writing on it, I got that and I had many games for that, but I didn't game as seriously as I did with Super Mario Brothers 3.
Awesome. What about you, Sarah Storm?
So for Hanukkah, I don't remember how old I was. I am an old in this situation. So my earliest gaming experience is with the original Nintendo system. Mm-hmm. We got it for Hanukkah and we got the whole, like our grandparents, I think, gave it to us. It was the whole set. So it was Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, mm-hmm. and the Olympic running, like the game.
Oh, track and field.
Track and field. And I vaguely remember arguing with my brother, fighting with my brother over who got to play it when. I really enjoyed Duck Hunt because I liked aiming. I liked playing clay pigeon shooting games, I guess, which is why later on, like my favorite arcade game was Area 51. Like I liked targeting things. Anyway, track and field. I'm not an athletic person. For our viewers, I have never been an listeners, I've never been an athletic person, but I loved track and field because it made me feel like I could like accomplish a physical thing. I was not really good at Super Mario Brothers. And also I think I was really rankled by the fact that they were rescuing a princess who did not just rescue herself. And maybe she did. I just was like, I can only play as a boy. These boys are boring. The princess is stuck in a castle and doesn't do anything. F this. So I played track and field and Duck Hunt.
I have a very important question for you, Sarah. You mentioned that you can't remember who was playing you or your brother. Who's older?
I'm older.
Okay, so I would like to talk about being the older sibling with video games and how apparently you and I were very different in this. So I may not be the best older sibling because my brother would do things like, hey, Sarah, this new system, the N64 just came out and I'm going to get it for Hanukkah. Will you get a controller for your Hanukkah present so you can play with me? And I'd go, Alan, I'm never going to play with you. No. And then he'd get it and go, Sarah, do you want to watch me play? And I'd go, no, only if I can play and you watch. And he'd go, okay. And so we did a lot of playing where I was either first player or only player. And my little brother would watch me and cheer me on. And as Geoff is a younger child, this works out great because I'm Mario and he's Luigi.
Luigi's the better character anyway, so I'm fine with it in that respect. Yeah.
My brother and I feel like he made really concerted efforts to involve me in his life, and I was just a sullen person for a really long time. So I'm trying to remember and not just create the memory in this moment. I feel like he did try to play with me. I wasn't as good at Super Mario Brothers either, because the kind of coordination, like track and field and duck hunt, were different kinds of coordination than Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I have a real aversion to things I don't do well quickly. And so I don't remember playing with him that much. But we both had controllers. I feel like we did fight over who got to use it. He always wanted to play Super Mario Brothers, and I wanted to play something else. That's an adorable story. It sounds like a very sweet relationship. Like my brother would be like, hey, do this with me. And I'd be like, no.
Well, I think my little brother just wanted to like do whatever I was doing for a number of years there. And like we were in Taekwondo together. We got our black belts together. Like we did a lot of things together. And so this was something that he wanted to do. And then also, so my cousins who lived around the corner from me were basically my second set of siblings, right? So they were over our house every weekend. It was my mom's sister's kids. So they lived literally walking distance from us. They went to high school with us. Geoff was married to my older cousin in a play once, did the morning announcements with her, like very much part of everybody's lives, right?
So my first podcasting experience, doing the morning announcements with your cousin.
That's true. You did. I didn't really think about it like that because we weren't one of those schools who had like video announcements or anything cool like that. And honestly, it's really for the best knowing you in high school. Anyway, so whenever they would come over, once we got the N64, we would play all of the multiplayer Mario games, right? So the original Mario Party, Mario Kart 64. We never really got into GoldenEye or anything like that, but we were intensely competitive to the point of like tackling each other so that we said no when it was our chance to get stars, lots of trash talk. Like we were very, very competitive at these games. And my brother was the youngest. So I have a cousin who's 3 years older than me and a cousin who's 1 year younger than me, and my brother's 3 years younger than me. So by no fault of his own, he wasn't quite as good at these games as we were because he was much younger, but we did not give him any leeway in that. We just beat him at the games.
It's so interesting because my brother is 2.5 years younger than me. And my recollection is that he was really impatient with me because I died a lot. And when we were trying to play 2-player, because again, like I didn't have great coordination for the game controller, and he was much better at it than I, like at least in my recollection, he was much better at it than I was.
But see, that's when you play games like Sonic 2 or 3, right? Where you can be Tails and what really the only person who matters is Sonic, and like Tails like kind of helps. That was great when my brother was younger because we also had the Sega Genesis. And so he was able to help with that.
We fought a lot. We got the original Game Boy and we had Metroid, which I didn't suck at as much. And so we fought a lot over who got to play Metroid. I don't remember, but I don't know that it stuck for me as the way that it did for him because I don't remember, like we had other games we must have done, but I don't remember if we did. Like I'd have to call him now and be like, what other games did we have? I don't know that we did for the original Nintendo. We must have. But for Game Boy, he had other games and I don't remember that I cared about any of them.
You just wanted to be Samus and shoot aliens.
Well, yeah, but like I think I also, again, remember, if I'm not really good at it very quickly, I'm like, F this, and I go on to do another thing. But here's a tidbit while we're talking about childhood. I'm a Star Trek obsessive, and I'm also a bookstore obsessive. And while I have never played like a D&D or anything like it, I did because Starfleet Academy wasn't real and I couldn't go. I did buy all of the Star Trek role-playing game manuals and owned them for a while just so that like, I don't know what I was expecting it to do. I think I was hoping it was going to help me like write spec scripts or like stories or what we would now call fan fiction, but wasn't really a term then. I invested like a not insignificant amount of money in Star Trek role-playing game books that I don't think I really read.
It was just the promise of someday being able to be in the Starfleet, right? Like
it really was. Like the one thing I remember writing when I was 12 was this an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, and I don't think that it still exists. And I'm sure it had a lot to do with like Troy and Crusher and me and whatever. I was 12 and hormonal. But it's like having the Starfleet manuals made me feel legit. Like I was so primed to be part of the role-playing game revolution, and it just never caught on. Like I never hooked in. But like effectively, I was writing what could have been a campaign, what could have been anything, right?
I mean, the good news is it's never too late.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing.
But I do want to go back to something that Sarah Moonen mentioned, because I think it's a thing that the two of you share, was when you mentioned you don't like to watch anyone play games, you prefer to be the one with the controller, which I know from Geoff telling stories of how he's usually watching you play something if it's on the TV, if you're both in the room together. And I feel like Sarah has the same thing. Like she would sit down with me when I was playing something narrative like Assassin's Creed or whatever, and she'd sit there for a few minutes and then just be like, oh, I'm good. I'm not interested in watching you play.
Yeah, I am fascinated by people who want to watch other people play video games, either in the same room, on the internet. Like, it actually makes no sense to me. But also, I am the kind of person who doesn't like watching TV or movies twice, which apparently is also very strange. I know that, Geoff, something that's been very good for you, or at least you've told me is good for you, is, you know, watching me experience Final Fantasy VII for the first time, or, you know, something that you love, watching me experience it. To me, the having to watch the thing again overrules the other, like, kind of compersion type feeling. And I'm just bored if I'm not doing it. I also don't watch a lot of, like, YouTube videos. I watch, like, narrative TV. I don't know what it is. I'm not really interested in watching other people play video games, with the exception of some kinds of speed runs where they do ridiculous shit that I could never in a million years do. Like the guy who played Super Mario 64 blindfolded. Like, okay, all right. That is like a legitimate skill and cool, but I'm not watching it to watch you play the game, you know?
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And it's funny, I don't think you're weird for that. I think there's that disconnect, right? Either people like, for example, with Twitch, people like watching people Twitch stream or people don't. I don't think there are people who dabble. I think it's either one or the other as far as watching others play games. And I find that I don't mind watching other people play games. But that said, if I'm in physical space with them, I'd much rather be playing with them than watching them play. I'm kind of like the in-between between you and Geoff. But on Twitch, I'll just throw something on. But I think that's also part of my podcasting brain. Like when someone's yammering over a video game or, you know, telling jokes or being goofy, I care more about the personality of the person than the game they're playing.
So this is Sarah Storm. So I'm curious because we're all people who participate in performance and performing in one and producing in one capacity or another, including podcasts. I would love to know what it's like for you to be an audience member in other, like, does the way that you engage with games track to the way that you engage with other forms of art? Because like I love theater, I love movies, I love TV, and I watch prodigious amounts. I also have a really hard time being an audience member because, and this has been true since I was like 3, I want to do it myself.
Yes. Certainly for me, I agree with that. I think I'm good with watching Sarah Moonen enjoy games for the first time or get into those things because that's enough of a little bit of a performance thing or enough of a, like, I'm bringing you in on this. To me, teaching and sharing and showing fulfills that performance thing. And yeah, live performance, I'm not a great audience member.
I would say, though, Geoff, to be fair, the way we've been playing video games recently, even though I'm the one with the controller, you're the command station with the multiple guidebooks telling me what to do. So you are as involved as I am in the game. You just happen to, you know, be doing it in a more manual
You're right.
way
I'm being the
than
producer. You're being the performer. And that's weird for us.
That is weird. I guess that's escapism or something.
I would like to paint the picture of what Sarah means by command center here. We are currently, as of this recording, playing Final Fantasy X-2. And that is a game, as Sarah said, we're not going to do a new game plus, we're not going to whatever. And it is infamously granular and minuscule, about 100% completion.
If you don't watch one video in one place that's optional, you can't 100% complete the game, and you have like, one tiny window to do it. So if you don't do it right, you're not going to
we're not
finish the
usually
game right.
this like microscopic in terms of guidebooks, but we have the strategy guide for Final Fantasy X-2. But this is the HD version, and some stuff's been updated, and some things have changed. So I have that open because it's got pictures and it's got maps. But I also, on my laptop, have a Final Fantasy X-2 walkthrough, but that's all text. So times when we need maps, I can go over here. And if I need to corroborate things because some fact's different, like I have the book open on the pillow on the couch and the laptop here, and Sarah's to my left. And so it's just like, what's going on? Hold on. Still loading. Oh, God. This is the closest I will ever feel to a Hollywood hacker. I'm in.
Yep. But so to answer your question, I think for me, it's about the medium more than anything else. And I'm finding this out a lot in quarantine. So let's go back. So watching theater, I'm always a stage manager, right? I'm watching the scene changes. I notice if a cue is wrong. Like you can't turn that off. Same thing with, I studied film theory in college. So there's a lot, every time you go to a class and they're like, you'll never be able to do X the same again. They're absolutely right. But for me, it's about online versus in person. Like at a burlesque show, I can super enjoy the experience of being in the audience. Of course, I'm always judgy and me and whatever because it's still performance. But I mentioned this when we first got on the call before we started recording. I'm not great at interacting with people over the internet. To me, that feels like so much work. It's maybe because I'm in 6+ hours of video calls a day for my job and in constant chat-based communication with people for my job. So it doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel interesting. And so interacting with virtual performance of any kind, it feels like, I have to be presentational in the chat. Like I have to show that I'm there and I'm appreciating it. And I think video games online, it's all the same, right? It's just a different medium that I don't like interacting with much.
It's always fascinating to me how differently everyone interacts with games. And I think that was a big part of why Geoff and I wanted to have you both on, other than we love you and we talk about you a lot, is because I've noticed with Sarah Storm, as well as you, just through stories when we've hung out together and played games together, that we all look at things very differently. Like Sarah Storm and I have often talked about narrative in games and how a lot of the walking sims that she's enjoyed, like What Remains of Edith Finch and Everyone's Gone into the Rapture, are interesting because of how you interact with the narrative, less about the mechanics. But that said, you also started the conversation by saying you love Tetris, which is all mechanics and no story. And so I feel like there's not an inconsistency there, but it's interesting how that range works.
I think what I've learned about myself in the last few years is that I really enjoy mechanics. So I've also designed, I do some conversation design and I do some interactive stuff I've been part of a team building an app for Alexa. I think a lot about mechanics. And I think that comes from my background in performance. It comes from my interest in playwriting. All of it sort of tracks into one thing, even like the way that I structure a narrative when I'm editing a podcast, right? I think I love narrative and I love mechanics, but I think I experience them in different ways. I don't know. Like I watched the Black Mirror episode, what's it called? Bandersnatch, right? I hated every second of it. I was like, fuck you for making me make these terrible choices. But I played it a lot because I love narrative. But in that instance, I cared absolutely zip about the narrative. I'm like, I am playing this TV game for the mechanics because I want to see how you handle it and how you make the video shift and the audio shift and what's your decision tree look like and can I build it in my head? I have a hard time just doing things for fun is what we're getting to right now. Like I love games. I guess what we're getting to, like everything is a puzzle to me. And I always want to see if I can figure out how it works. It's a testament to the quality of the narrative. If I get too lost to pay attention, it's like what you were saying, Sarah Moonen, about like how when you're watching something as a stage manager, if I get lost in the story, it is a testament to how brilliant the story is, because otherwise there is that little bit of me that's like, how did you do it? Anyway, I don't know that.
I mean, I wasn't looking for a solid answer. It's just something that I noticed about your game playing. Whereas with you, Sarah Moonen, I've never noticed a clear path between mechanics and games. I feel like each game is an isolated, like you like it based on why you like it. I don't know. I've never seen at least just through our friendship, a straight line of like, I prefer X game. Do you have a preference for the kinds of games you play, or is it a game by game basis?
I have a preference for the kind of games I don't want to play. And I think that informs this a little bit. Like, I'm not interested in a Dark Souls type game where it's meant to just make you keep getting better at it, I guess. But to the same token, I really love games where, you know, I can learn a course, right? And like get really good at the like platformy bits of it and get better that way. I also don't like doing the same thing over and over. If I can't get to a save point and I die, I make Geoff do it again to get me to where I was because I'm bored. I don't want to do the same thing again. I don't, whatever. And in terms of the other kinds of games I don't like games that aren't active. Like, I have so many friends who love Animal Crossing and those kind of things. Like, to me, that just feels like, all right, when are we getting to the game? Right? And that's so hard, right? Because it's a nice social thing that you can do with people and those kinds of things. But like, again, I think this just goes to the way I enjoy interacting with people, and it's not in that way. But I think my first love is puzzle platformers, right? So things like Zelda, like the N64 collectathons, those really are in my wheelhouse. And I just recently learned, which is ridiculous, that PlayStation had some too, you know, like Crash and Spyro. And I just missed those because we didn't have PlayStation in my house. So I'm very excited to go get to do those. And it's interesting because like open world games always scared me because I was like, that's the other thing. I don't like not knowing where to go. So that's why I like having a guide like Geoff or like my friend Amanda, who I was playing Inquisition with. I'm like, I want to go to the beach where the dragon was there, but it was a beach and I don't know what it's called and I don't want to figure it out. And she's like, okay, just go to Stormrack. That's the thing you're looking for. There you go. To me, I think it's about not repeating. I'm not very patient with my video games. And I do like all kinds of video games. But I think also just I trust the recommendations that I get, right? People know me, know what I like. It's not just Geoff, but it is also Geoff. I have a good friend at work who also does these things. And weirdly, one of my favorite things, and this might be a different point of conversation, but gaming has become so much of my identity that it's like my NPC text for work. I specifically made my work setup at home overlook our video game collection so that people ask me questions. Oh my God, is that a bookshelf? No, it's my 900 plus collection of video games. And I catch the people who are interested in talking about that. And people know that it's a thing they can ask me. And back to my NPC text, you know, in my company that used to be like 180 people, even when I was in the office, people would ask me things all the time. And I'd have like 3 things on loop that I would say, depending on the kind of person that they were. But like, and I'd come in prepared with them every day. And like, look, I had friends at work, but I had other people too. So I take lessons from video games and just, you know, I'm the weirdo, right? For being a mild gamer in the gaming community, I am this like intense nerd amongst the normals that I work with. And that's fun.
Yeah. I am also an intense nerd among the normals, although it's in different ways. But it's very satisfying. I love that NPC approach to interactions. That's pretty brilliant.
My old boss told me that apparently CEOs do this, like highly, like incredibly successful people do that because it doesn't take up brain space to have casual interactions all the time. And I was like, oh, that was definitely not why I was doing it. I was doing it because that's what video game characters do. But thanks for the tip.
I love that.
While we're talking about NPCs, I think part of the reason I am resistant to playing some games is that I'm either hyper focused or easily distracted. And Matt watched this. We got Fallout. Which Fallout game?
Fallout 4.
Fallout 4. I got to a point in the central narrative. It wouldn't let me, as a woman, romance a woman I wanted to, or I don't know what, it was weird. And I was like, meh. And then I got to the point in the central narrative where like something happened and I didn't appreciate, I don't like shooting. I don't like a lot of violence. And something really violent happened and I was like, F this. But I had discovered along the way that I could build settlements for NPCs. And the thing that Matt had to explain to me, and it broke my heart, was that no amount of building community for these non-player characters was going to unlock any additional interactions. And I don't play The Sims or anything, but like my favorite part of that was like constructing settlements. Sorry, that's a tangent. I don't want to derail where we were going.
I mean, this is a podcast full of tangents.
I love that. So I feel like you and I should play the same game. You build the settlements. I go do the story and the fighting.
Teamwork.
There you go.
Perfect.
And honestly,
Perfect.
yeah, that's a failure on Bethesda's part, that in this post-apocalyptic world, building settlements does nothing. Come on.
If any designers are out there listening, like, I feel like so much bang for your buck in an open world kind of game would exist if you wanted to do community building off the main narrative and it actually unlocked stuff that tied to the game. That would be amazing.
The funny precursor to this story, though, is that Fallout Shelter, which was a mobile game that preceded Fallout 4, allowed you to like create this underground shelter and NPCs and like get resources. And Sarah loved it and I liked it. And so then when we went to Fallout 4, I said, the games connect a little bit. Like, I think it pulls some data. And she was like, oh, and when I was playing and we were talking about it and then she started playing and got to that settlement part, she thought that meant that she could just build her own shelter in that space. And what's really funny is the exact games, Sarah, that you said that you lose interest with quick because there's no action, as it were, like the Animal Crossings and stuff. Sarah likes some of those if there is reward to the actions you're taking. But even then, like, you liked Animal Crossing New Horizons for a time.
I did for a time. I wanna yes. So I did for a time until I was like, oh, this is capitalism as a video game, and I'm already really busy having to engage with capitalism in my own life, and I don't want to spend my free... I'm currently doing a rewatch. We watched Picard and Discovery, and I went all the way back to the start of TNG, like much further back in quarantine, have gone through all of Deep Space Nine and am now almost done with Voyager. It's like, if I have free time, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest in a utopian society that like is not in any way perfect, but people are earnestly trying to be better, as opposed to pay some dude back a bajillion bells for the house that doesn't, like, it was so... I love my favorite thing about Animal Crossing is the creative things that people are using it. Like, people are using it in ways I don't think the designers ever intended to connect and create. Mm-hmm. That's what I love about Animal Crossing. I hated having to do tasks to like earn stuff.
I mean, I will agree that it does feel like chores sometimes. And like, that's why I burn out hard on it. Like, I loved it in early quarantine. So like hanging out with all these cute animals and doing stuff. And then like the third time I had to go bug hunting for something, I was like, I'm good. And then as an anxious human, and I'm curious if this affects Sarah or Geoff also, after I've been away from my town in Animal Crossing too long, it's happened several times in several games, I then get nervous to go back because I'm afraid they're all going to be mad that I haven't been there for 6 months.
That is why I've never started an Animal Crossing game from the GameCube era. That is why.
That's really funny. Well, speaking of the like feeling like it's a to-do list, that's part of my problem with open world games, actually. Mm-hmm. I go to my map, I see all the exclamation points, I can't log off until they're all gone. I can't leave the section until all the things are complete. And I've been told that in some of the games they just come back, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And it's why I haven't started Assassin's Creed Odyssey, maybe, because I just played Origins and I loved it, but I would be like, okay, I just 3 more before I go to bed. And I'm like, it really doesn't matter. I'm just getting this camel back from this guy. Like, it's not important for the story, but like it's an exclamation point on my thing and I have to do it.
This is why I eventually stopped playing Fallout 4. Like, I had noped out on the original story. So at this point, I'm only doing side quests unless it happens to interact me a little bit with the main story by accident, right? Which is all it would do. I lost entire nights on like 2 or 3 occasions where like I was like, I'm just gonna do a little bit more, and I thought it had been an hour and it had been like 8, and I had to go do a day's work, and I was like, I cannot do that. I had to put it away because I lost all sense of time.
Yes, us type A people need to help all the people and check all the boxes and do all the things. And yeah, it's why I've never played Skyrim, and maybe I will someday, but not without guidance and assistance and someone to tear me away from it, you know.
I mean, that's fair.
It's as much of a check-in of like, how long is it? What time is it? As a guide.
That's fair.
I have a question, and this is because some really cool games are first-person shooter, and I can't. Does anybody else on this call have that thing? Do you get really disoriented and sick when you are trying to watch the vantage point of the character as opposed to seeing something else move through space?
Oh, I rolled my eyes when you said first person shooter because I just wrote off the whole genre.
Oh, thank God I'm not alone. Okay. It makes me seasick.
And I felt so bad, the fact that, like, I don't love first-person shooters in the pure sense of, like, there are genres of games that I love that the window dressing doesn't matter. Narrative doesn't matter. I just love these things for their mechanics.
Puzzle games or rhythm games.
Rhythm games, puzzle games, certain kinds of RPGs, like that kind of number crunchy, whatever. First-person shooters are not that for me. But if it's like a cool storytelling mechanic, or like you were talking about before, Sarah Storm, about like if the things interact well and I'm forgetting the mechanics, cool. I was late to the BioShock train and really enjoyed the integration of story and gameplay that it had. And especially because it gave me a melee weapon, I didn't have to worry about wildly whipping around. It was just like, okay, just hit them with a wrench. Great. And unfortunately, I couldn't bring Sarah Moonen in on that.
Yeah, I have a needle phobia, and like they just like straight up like bicep needle all the time every time you level up. And I was like, nope, not a game for me.
And I've been able to find one since where it's just like, no, maybe we try this again without that level of weird.
I had 3 thoughts at once. One is, was Area 51 and Duck Hunt a first-person shooter? And maybe it's that it's hit the uncanny valley.
Technically, they are, because they're shooting games, but you don't move in that space. You don't control your movement in that space.
Shooting gallery.
Yeah.
Got it. I can do a shooting gallery. I've never touched an actual gun. They freak me out. But I really like shooting galleries.
I also love shooting galleries, Sarah, and not first-person shooters. We got some fancy light guns that are coming so we could play shooting gallery games on our modern TVs. Like, I'm very excited about this, but also first-person shooters are not that. It's something totally different.
When Matt and I were dating, he was playing a BioShock game, and I tried to engage. It was BioShock.
It was BioShock Infinite.
Yeah. So I had issues with the narrative personally, but before
you and the rest of the world.
Oh yeah, especially Infinite. Oh God.
So I was deeply offended and very angry, but I couldn't even engage that much to learn more about all the things that were making me so angry and like deconstruct it and analyze it, because the way that the motion happened, I got so sick. We were in Staten Island at your parents'. I got so sick from trying to watch it for like 20 minutes that it took us like an hour or 2 for me to like be able to go home.
No.
I was so ill.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and I think what's interesting about first-person shooters also is because Geoff knows last year, in the year of 2020, the decade-long year, I went on a quest to try and see if I disliked first-person shooters or if I disliked Call of Duty, which is very different from the rest of first-person shooters. And I think what I found was, if it's a first-person game where it's narrative-focused, which is usually called an immersive sim, your BioShocks, your Prey, or Dishonored, I like those better because it's not just running and gunning. There's story, you can sneak around, you can find stuff. There are some pure shooting games like Doom that I did enjoy because it's heavy metal and blowing up aliens, and that was fun for me. But also, I'm the same way. I get motion sick, and I can watch someone stream a first-person shooter because there's other things going on. It's not my whole screen. There's chat, and I'm like typing, and so I'm not that focused. But if I am just sitting next to someone playing a first-person shooter and I can't control the character and they whip the camera around, I will get motion sick.
It's making me motion sick talking about it.
That's really funny.
Well, so it's interesting because I don't actually get motion sick from it. I'm just very uninterested in it. And some of that I think is also the kinds of people who tend to play first person shooters. And back to the whole like Gamergate and those kinds of things, the toxic community around stuff like Halo and those kind of games. And when I say to people like, oh, I'm a gamer, specifically retro gamer, I don't know. I find that the communities of people who are very into the first person shooters are going to be the first ones to be like, oh, well, what's your major time on this? And I just can't engage with that either.
I mean, that's fair. I think a bigger part of that, too, is that you are a woman who plays games, and most men in the gaming space are shitheels. I think that's a big part of it. And a lot of those shitheels play Call of Duty. Not everyone who plays Call of Duty is that, and I know that. I know tons of folks who love Halo and Call of Duty and Doom who aren't that. But
why roll that dice if you don't have to?
Right, exactly.
There's enough toxic masculinity in anyone's day-to-day life. I just I never saw the appeal of like, and I will say, I'm watching your face as I say this. I'm painting, well, because I'm painting people who play first person shooters with a really broad brush. And I'm about mentally, I'm listening to myself do this thing where I'm about to be like, all people who play games like Call of Duty are, which isn't fair. At the same time, I have to consider, as a very femme presenting person, I think a lot about how I move through space and where I'm safe and where I'm not. And in my mind, some games really glorify violence and bloodshed. And I, through some life experience, like I think about where I've been safe and where I've not been safe, and who I've been safe with and who I've not been safe with. And like correlation is not causation, but I'm like, oh, right. If you like violent video games where you're just shooting, I am less likely to trust you. If I know that about you first and nothing else.
I second that. And, this actually goes back to something you were saying, and I think I was saying too earlier, Sarah, about representation, right? And, not liking Mario because you weren't the princess, and, my first Game Boy because it had pink on it for me. In these spaces where we find representation is really important. I remember my first game with a woman protagonist was a Barbie Game Boy game. It was a terrible platformer and was not a good game. But I was a girl playing a game where the girl was the main character. And is that a serious video game? No. But is it really nice that there are other video games now where that is a thing and where there's a space that I can feel like is meant for me to play, as opposed to one where let's just go kill all the people? Yes.
I remember how excited I was when I realized that Samus was a woman.
That was so big.
And then how angry it was so big, but I was also like, why didn't I know that earlier? Like, and I know why I didn't know that earlier, but I was like, oh, come on. It would have been so much cooler to me as a kid playing a game if I had known. And it's not even about like, I don't know. I'm interrogating the whole concept of gender and gender presentation for myself. It's been an ongoing thing. Like, I wasn't looking to see a woman. I think I was looking to see myself reflected. And that meant a lot of things. And in video games back then, it was pretty binary. And now it's like making avatars in games. I'm always super like, so please understand, like there have been many games that Matt has gotten me to start that I sort of petered out on. Like I made a femshep in Mass Effect. I made a DJ in Fuser. So here's the difference between Mass Effect and Fuser in terms of the avatars and why I think it matters. Mass Effect, I have a pretty fat femshep, and that felt amazing. I'm like, all right, nobody's questioning my ability to lead or do all these things. I could be a fat femshep. Fuser is pretty amazing, but like the biggest avatar is still Robin Arzon from Peloton, like tiny and buff. And I'm like, oh, come on. If you're going to let me make them fat, let me make them genuinely fat and let that be okay. And those are some very physical level things that I'm looking for. But then it's like, what kind of variety of skin tone, what kind of variety of facial feature, what kind of piercings, and like, can people really create if part of the idea is to see yourself in the world, right, and you get to build an avatar? I feel like go big or go home. Like if you can't really do it, it should be really fantasy based and not at all based in trying to make people look real. Like if you're going to do an avatar and there's only 6 types, like make them all elves and orcs and whatnot. And like, don't show people that their humanity doesn't count enough to be included in the design.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about character creators a lot on the show and how I am a white male, so I am represented everywhere. Too much, some might argue, and I would agree. But there are still little things that I can relate to that I don't see in games and then go, oh, I really wish that thing was there. And I don't always know the thought process behind not putting the design in. Like, of course, famously, Ubisoft said animating a girl in Assassin's Creed would be harder, which is dumb and bullshit. And like, was bullshit and is bullshit. But that said, for me, the big thing now is seeing my queerness represented in games. It's been an ongoing thing on Reignite with Frankie that I'm talking about romancing this character Caden, who I thought was a milquetoast nothing character the first time I played Mass Effect, and now I'm seeing, due to the incredible performance of Raphael Sbarge, that there's more to this character, and a queer romance with him is interesting, and I'm attracted to a character like that, whereas the first time I played this game I wasn't. And exploring my queerness in game has been where I've been doing a lot of searching lately. Like even if I can give my character nail polish in a game, feels like a victory, because that's queer to me, even if it's not queer to other people. And I'm just always curious how people engage with creating characters. Actually, here's a question for both of you on this topic. Because I don't know that I have a preference of creating myself in a game or playing a narrative with an existing character that I just go along for the ride with. Do you both have a preference to one or the other? Would you rather create a character? Would you rather just play a story where you're a character?
I would rather play a story where I'm a character, because back to that whole like patience thing, if I could be like, here's a picture of me. Oh, good. I'm there. Perfect. I have no patience for sliders and things like that. But like, again, when I played Child of Light and it was a little redheaded girl playing the game, I felt great. I was like, that's awesome. I'm obviously not a little girl anymore, but this feels like something, a nod in my direction. Oh, and she can fly. That's even better. But I also, weirdly enough, have not played a lot of games. I think maybe Inquisition is one of the first games I ever played with a character creator. I don't end up in games where that's really a thing very much. And I 100% appreciate the ability to see yourself and have options that make representation. I just don't have again, to me, that feels like an Animal Crossing thing, right? Like building something that isn't directly the game. And I don't know why. And maybe it's just because I haven't played a lot of games that have it.
For me, it really depends on the situation. Like I'm thinking, I love West of Loathing. And like, they're all stick figures. If you've never played, it's like ridiculous. It's just fun. It's dumb and fun. And I mean that in the most complimentary possible way. And there it's like, it's stick figures. So anything goes. But I still like maybe nod to whatever, right? And when I played Beyond Two Souls, like there's none of that. So it's like I get dropped in. And walking sims, being like a sort of omniscient observer, like a first person observer, that is fine. But like if it's going to give me the option, I want to go as far as I can, because I don't feel like I see myself enough in things. And so whenever I'm given the opportunity, I'm going to push it as far as I can to embrace however I'm feeling and think I look at that moment. And I will judge it harshly depending on what the limitations of the box are. And then I also love those sliders because, again, the more I get interested and invested in like the voice first economy and designing and building for that space, like the more I like to push the edges and kick the tires and see what's possible.
That makes a lot of sense. I also think that like just for so long I've been grabbing at crumbs, right? Like if anybody ever tried to play Peach or Daisy in a multiplayer Mario game that wasn't me, like that was the girl, that one was for me. And you know, I think I just got used to that too, right? Like the little crumbs throughout the years. And so I stopped looking in the same way.
I think it's partially why I didn't play video games for so long, because I was like, fuck you, I'm nowhere. And I had more things to do with my time. And because I didn't feel represented, I think it made me very skeptical of games, period. We are, to a certain extent, our core wounds, right? And like, we're always trying to like fix the stuff that got broken pretty early on. And I respond so viscerally to feeling like invisible or missing in a space. And I hear you on the crumbs and I think I accept them a lot. But the flip side is sometimes I have a really visceral reaction. If I don't feel like I'm a part of it enough, I'm like, fuck you, fuck your designers. I'm going to go watch TV, read a book, cook something. Like I won't even, the story could be the most brilliant story in the world. And again, it's not an issue if you don't get to design it at all. But if you get to design it and I'm left out, or it feels like a lot of people are left out, I get unreasonably angry. I get angry and I write it off.
I feel like that makes sense though.
Yeah, I agree. I think I react in a little bit different way. I take the crumb and go, okay, great. You invited me into this space. Now I'm going to be better than you at it.
Oh, I love that.
And take it as a challenge. But there's a limit on this, right? I like games where I can complete 100% within the game. I will never play a new game plus. I'm not interested in doing the same thing again. And I will never play a game where it doesn't matter what the game intended. There are people on the internet who are better than me at it, right? Like I don't want to play for a leaderboard. I want to play to 100% the game and beat it and do that and say, I have gotten 100% in Super Mario 64. I have gotten 100% in DK 64. I have got, I have beaten the game. And it's great because there was a little something for me that got me into the game and I beat it. What I don't want is to be competing against other people who spend 1 billion hours doing this. I want to beat what the game designers intended.
So do you consider yourself a completionist then?
In most games, yes, unless it's dumb. So here's an example. We just played Super Mario and the Origami King. Yes. And I loved it. It was such a good game. And the map had a way to 100% the map, right? So you could get each area. It was like there's question mark blocks you had to get and secrets to find, things in chests. There were like a certain number of things you needed to do to 100% the map. And then there were these trophies, and the trophies were not fun. I had no interest in doing something 100 times just to get a trophy. No thanks. I 100%ed the map. I decided that was where my game was over, and I only did the fun bits. Same thing with Assassin's Creed, right? I did every single exclamation point I could on the map, and then there were all these like online challenge nonsense. I don't care. I did what was there. I did what was in the game. I'm not interested in all this extra stuff.
Yeah, I used to be more of a completionist in the Xbox 360 generation. I would get every achievement in games and like hunt down the achievements. And then I don't know, I think there was just a game that had like online multiplayer achievements that were tied to completing the game that broke me because they were just impossible to get because I didn't play competitively. And I just, after that, stopped. And like the PS5 and PS4 have trophies, but I've never platinumed a game, 100%ed it for the trophies. And it's not that different from what the achievements were on the 360, but I feel like I got to a point, I think also where I'm trying to play so many games that if I can't finish it, like to me right now, an 80 to 100 hour game sounds like torture. And it's not. There are plenty of great games that are that long. Like my biggest example is Persona 5, which I've been told is just this giant game. And I played the first 20 hours of it and loved it. But when I thought about having to do it for another 80 hours to finish it, not even complete it, I was like, I could play like 3 other games in that time. 3 other Lasts of Us or Ghost of Tsushima. And I was just like, I'd rather see those narratives. But on the other hand, when I'm playing something like Shovel Knight, where the narrative is fun and interesting, but not the point, the mechanics and the platforming is the point, that I'll play and play New Game Plus and 100% because it's a more bite-sized game that I want every little bit of. I don't know if there's a logical through line to that. It's just, it's game by game for me these days.
I think part of it for me is that I grew up on Nintendo and achievements were not a thing. Right. And so when I got a PlayStation and got like in that world, I never played Xbox. That was like outside my world. That was like something other people did. I don't care. It's not in the game. It's not part of my game. So I'm not engaging in it.
I don't play games to compete with other, the one exception to what I'm about to say is that there's like a competitive Tetris mode.
Tetris 99.
And that's okay sometimes. But like if I'm playing a game, either I'm playing it with somebody or I'm playing it by myself. I don't need to beat other people. Like, there's nothing for me. I don't link game. Like my silly phone game, I will not join a team on Homescapes. I will not link it. I used to do this, but like I will not link it to Facebook. I don't want notifications. I am doing it specifically. Like I understand why I'm doing it. It's for the dopamine hit. It's like push the button, get a treat. And that's all I need from it. And if I let myself fall through the rabbit hole and like start competing and start trying, like I am competitive. I don't want to lose any more time than I'm already losing to the few moments of distraction I'm allowing myself.
I completely agree with that. And I think for me, like completing a game out, like just inside itself is enough of a win for me, as opposed to like, this is why I'm never interested in playing an MMO. I don't want to compete games online. Like, I think the game was built to be the game.
So like, I don't know that I would do well in an MMO at all. What I wanted out of Fallout, I heard about Fallout. What was the new one?
Fallout
76.
76.
I was really excited when that game was coming out, because I, again, envisioned different things than was designed. I was like, I want to get in there. And I wanted to do in Fallout 76 what people have done in Animal Crossing. I was like, I want to start a podcast that only exists and can be listened to when you're playing Fallout 76. Like, I want to go into the game, like build a radio station and talk to people. I want to exist in that world and it's like Second Life stuff, right?
Yeah, but that's super cool.
It would be amazing if it were possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think also for me now, like I do play some competitive online games, but it's less about the competition and more about the people I'm playing with. Like I have a bunch of friends who I met at PAX East back when we could do things in the world and go out. And we became pretty close and have Discord calls regularly. And we started playing Overwatch together, which is an online competitive shooter. And like, I couldn't play that game by myself with strangers on my team because I would die a lot and I wasn't fun. But if I'm playing with 4 friends and we're all cracking jokes and sort of paying attention to what we're supposed to do in the game, but mostly just hanging out, that's more interesting to me. But the minute that goes away, like any game where I have to go online and play by myself, MMOs included, like if I'm playing MMOs with a bunch of my friends who I don't get to see in physical space as much, that's a lot of fun for me. But the minute they abandon it to go to another game, I go, well, I guess I'm not going to play this game anymore because I just have no desire to push through it by myself.
Seeing the end of the checklist is nice in a single-player open world, but an MMO, the checklist never ends. The exclamation points never stop popping up. It never stops, and you have to walk away.
And then again, it goes back to my issue with Animal Crossing. It's like, I love my work. I genuinely love my work, but it is work. It takes a lot of effort. I am tired when I am done. And I don't see the appeal in turning on a console and doing it more.
I completely agree with that.
I remember very early in New Horizons release, Sarah Moonen and I, we were having a Zoom call with some friends, several of whom were into the game. And one of them described to us what they were doing to maximize getting bells. It was like going to an island and setting it up so that they could catch tarantulas, which give you the most bells. And for the description of it just sounded like that they needed to bulldoze the island and flatten it in order to draw out the tarantulas. I was like, so in order to maximize your profits, you're destroying all nearby natural resources for your own gain. This is max capitalism. I know, Sarah Storm, you said before, this feels like capitalism, the game, but getting that description, I was just, I don't need that work. I don't need to engage with that.
I will say, I see some of the appeal of Animal Crossing, watching a thing like Animal Crossing. It's if you want to know what happens, in terms of the loose story of the game, then maybe you scratch that itch by watching somebody else do it. But I don't want to, that was the other thing is I enjoyed the repetitive activity of breaking rocks and stuff. But then I was like, I'm totally wrecking this place. And that wasn't fun.
Well, and so something like Animal Crossing, I'm so glad that all my friends who enjoy creating online communities and need that connection to other people have a space that they can do that is outside of video calls and outside, I think that that's really cool and really wonderful. For me personally, I don't like interacting with other people virtually. And like I said, it's been a hard year because of that. But it even Matt, what you were saying about going on a raid with your friends and going and doing stuff, I'm like, but then you have to schedule a meeting and you have to, and then that's work. And all of a sudden it no longer is a fun thing and it's work.
Sure. I think it's where your brain determines work to be. That line is so blurred for me personally, the guy who produces 8 podcasts, hosts 4 podcasts, Twitch streams, and does a day job. That time blurs to me in a way because I think when it comes to calendaring, I'm so natural at it that scheduling and then jumping on a call doesn't feel like work to my brain until it does. Because then there are definitely moments, even when I record the show, where I'm just like, I have to get up and I have to have breakfast. But then I sit down with Geoff and see his smiling face and I'm fine. But I don't think I have a clear line between work and play. I kind of, especially now that I have 2 video game podcasts, it's I think it all just blurs together. Until recently when I tried to stream Mass Effect. With the new Mass Effect Legendary Edition coming out and I tried to stream the first game, I played for about 4 hours, had fun, and then I thought about playing again and I'm like, ugh, but this is my favorite game and now it's work. In that moment, I had a clear line. I was like, well, now I don't want to play Mass Effect anymore. And also I'm playing Mass Effect 3 for Reignite, and I have to keep the playthroughs separate. Then my brain divided it and found a clear line. And even with Legendary Edition, I decided when that comes out in spring of this year, and who knows when this podcast airs, now that I think about it, it could be out by the time this airs, that I have to make fun. I have to make not work. I'm not going to stream it. I may post screenshots about it, but I'm not going to treat it like work because I want my favorite game that's getting a remaster to feel fun and feel like play again. And that's something I'm just realizing now is kind of how my brain works.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think for me, it's not even that. I'm also the queen of schedules. You should have seen my calendar back in the old days. To me, making an in-person meeting does not feel like work. Making anything virtual feels like work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
And that definitely affects the way that I do gaming. And it's the same reason I will never play a PC game. I spend 9 hours of my day working on a computer. this is the closest I've been to my computer because I need my headset on for any social thing. I put it very far away. I need to treat it not like a computer that I can be typing at or touching. That is how I have to separate my work and my play, because if I'm at a computer like I am for work, all bets are off. It's work.
That's so interesting. I realized I just had to replace my personal laptop. And I hardly ever touch it because I'm always on my work laptop. And when I'm not on my work laptop, I'm like, no, screw this. I mean, like, I'm still watching something like on another digital device, but like, if
I can't watch it on the PS4 on the TV, I don't really want to watch it. I don't want to watch something I have to watch on my computer.
I feel weird / bad that my iPad is like, it functions as a handful of things. It is the way I FaceTime with people. I read on my Libby app or like a Kindle situation, and I watch TV. Like it's my communication device, but it doesn't, like, I can check emails and I do it probably more than I should, but I can't, because of the limitations of the interface as far as like doing work in a dock or a drive, I can't really engage with work that way, and it helps. I'm like, oh right, I have to go deliberately engage in something else. Can I totally tangentially bring up something that I've been noticing? Okay. So, well, first of all, I want to say, like, your mileage may vary. I'm not trying to sit here on on a podcast about games being like, this is what I don't like about games. Like, just my opinion. So I've been watching a lot of Star Trek. And what's been super interesting to me, in addition to like, can I tell, and when people are getting a little bit tired of how their characters are being written, and the answer is yes. If you watch it all back to back, you can start to see the fatigue. Sorry, I feel like that's a mean thing to say. It's just
no one who makes Star Trek is going to
listen or care. No. Sorry. So the holodeck, the evolution of the holodeck, it's two things. The way that technology tracks in Star Trek and the way that the holodeck evolves in Star Trek, I think directly has to do with this conversation, because of when each of these shows are being made and what's technologically possible in the real world at the time, and where they see gaming going. And I wanted to look this up before I came to this taping because I wasn't sure. Like Voyager, so where I am in Voyager, it's the very early aughts now, right? I'm in season 7, so it's like 2003, maybe, I think.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah. So the holodeck is now very clearly sort of like a weird meld of LARPing and playing an MMO. And I wanted to see, I didn't get to look this up before I sat down, but I'm like, this is fascinating. So in the beginning, like, it was always sort of LARPing in like the Next Generation. DS9, they admitted that like, if you're in deep space or on a long-term mission, you have certain needs that are getting attended to in that space. And Voyager, it feels like the way that novels and television and video games have all sort of coalesced. And I'm so fascinated by the way that people are visioning gaming in 2003, like what it will be 400 years later. Because I actually think that we're going to get to where that is much, much faster, right? Like, as with anything that's shown in Star Trek, like VR is huge now, right? Like, it's coming faster and faster. I don't know about being physically able to walk into that space. Anyway, that's just in knowing this conversation was coming, and in obsessively, in a completionist way, watching all of the new treks. That is a thing that stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's something. Actually, I'm curious if you guys, Geoff and Sarah Moonen, have any interest in this, because I have zero. I don't own a VR headset. I've considered getting it for the PS5 just because it's more affordable than a lot of the previous VR headsets, but I hated the Wii in the sense that I had to get up and move around. I like my gaming to be, I like a controller. I like the feeling of a controller. When I play a lot of PC games, I still use a controller. I don't have an interest in virtual reality because I don't want to get up and dance in the game. It's one of the reasons I never really played DDR, which I know you both like. But I like to just hold a controller. You're pointing. You guys can't see this, but Sarah is pointing to the DDR pad directly behind her on the video call. That said, I love watching you both play DDR. It's some of my favorite memories of the cons that we've gone to together. I don't even know if I've asked Geoff this. Do either of you have any interest in VR?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this. First off, let's go back to the moving and doing things. Obviously, we are all about peripherals in this house, right? We've got Donkey Kongo, we've got DDR. I've been playing Ring Fit Adventure, which is the first thing that's got me to not actively hate exercise in years. And Skyward Sword was my favorite game on the Wii. I thought it was hilarious that I just had to hold my hand up in the air and like fight like this. And then I'd watch people play and like, you don't have to move that much. And I'm like, but you're sword fighting. You do need to move that much. You're going to lose. And so I'm coming at this from a very different perspective than you are, Matt, and that I do not mind that my video games get me to move. I like my dance game on the Switch where I am dancing around holding the controllers, but VR headsets are gross. A friend of ours has VR, and I loved playing Beat Saber, and I really liked the, what was it called? Robot Recovery Lab or whatever, by the Aperture Labs people. And the fact that you could just like drop yourself anywhere on Earth with Google, and that was really cool. You take the headset off and put it on someone else, and it's covered in their sweat, and that is disgusting to me. And I don't know. We need a better way for me to be interested in it. I don't love the sensory deprivation of blocking out the rest of the outside world. While I'm playing my Ring Fit, I can still hear the doorbell ring. I could still talk to Geoff, even if it's like between reps and I'm breathing heavy. Like, I don't like it for the escapism. I like it for some of the games and nifty things about it. I don't know that I need it. Every time it comes up, we're like, oh, it's like $300 now. It's not worth it. We don't need it.
I keep very nearly. I'm the one who's watching the sales on the PSVR. I don't need to get an Oculus or anything like that. I'm with you, Matt, on the like, oh, the PlayStation one's a little more affordable. Once they released Beat Saber for the PSVR, it's become more dangerous. I don't necessarily need it for the sensory deprivation, although that does help me focus in a way. I enjoy that. I like the games that I have played with it. I am also with you, Sarah Monin, on we do like peripherals in our house. I do like to move. I am I lean when I turn in a racing game. The fact that Mario Kart Wii, you can get the steering wheel thing to turn. Sarah undersold how competitive she can be in Mario Kart sometimes. Not all the time, but just occasionally. And when we would play Mario Kart Wii and I'd get the steering wheel, she's like, is that making you any better? It's making it more fun. I've also, Mario Kart, I've given up ever beating Sarah at a race. If I do, it's an anomaly. It's fun. This isn't a goal. And so with that being said, yeah, VR, I think, yeah, if we figure out how to easily disinfect the foam, I think that'll be a much easier buy in the next 2 or 3 years. I'd say that's kind of where it's looking.
I need it to come out of Uncanny Valley land. Like it currently replicates my issue with first person shooter, which is that I get pretty seasick pretty easily. Yeah, which is why I get so excited by like the fantasy of holodeck technology. Because it's like, oh, if you're just immersed in it and it all moves the way that people move, then that's cool. Bose has sunglasses that have speakers in them. And you can engage with digital assistants in the sunglasses. At the point that they put screens in the sunglasses, they will have solved the Oculus disgusting foam problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a literal heads-up display, right? Like that's what we're talking about.
Give us that hug.
Yeah, it's funny. The thing that you mentioned, Sarah Moonin, about the sensory deprivation is the only problem I have with VR. Like VR is a neat toy to me, and like the experience I've had with it has been fun, but I remember playing one of the simulator games, like one of the demo games, on it at a friend's house. It was on the HTC Vive, and I was playing it, I was in it, it was fun, I could see my hands, and it was really cool, it felt really immersive. And then someone talked to me from outside the game. I don't know if it was Sarah at the time or someone else at this party we were at, back when you could have parties with people in the same room, and it just threw me off. Like it just weirded me out, because suddenly I was in a space where there was a disembodied voice coming to me that wasn't there, and I couldn't see it, I couldn't touch it, and that threw me off and made the experience awful. And like I had to take it off after that, because it just it ruined the immersion and made me completely disoriented.
This is again why I'm waiting for VR to be something I can step into in an enclosed space where I know that's what's happening. I think from a technological perspective that AR is exciting, and AR is super useful if I'm like, so our apartment is currently studs. We are in a rental. There was a fire. Like we're going to have to go back eventually. It gets rebuilt. If I want to like envision how a couch might look in that space, AR is super cool. I don't really want to get super distracted. Like I tried before J.K. Rowling turfed herself out of any enjoyment I might have gotten from the Harry Potter franchise. I played the Wizarding World, and like it was gimmicky and engaging for 2 or 3 tries to like play the AR version. And I was like, it's cool that it's possible, but it's not what I'm looking for. Like I like to be in this space or not be in this space, with the exception of if my knees could have held out, I would have totally done the zombie run. Like that I thought was so motivating to get people to move. But mostly it's like I want to, if I'm with you in physical space, in like meat space, I want to be with you. We can play a tabletop game, a role-playing game, that's amazing. But I don't want to suddenly mush the worlds because I feel like it makes me less in control of my environment. I don't feel as safe. And yeah, lots of reasons.
I agree with that. When I had a VR headset on, one or both of the cats that were in the house ran by my feet, and one of them like was touching my. I was like, oh no, they're not in the thing I can see, and this is not okay.
Whereas I'm an adult who has lived his entire life with ADHD, and so this notion of I don't like putting on this device because like it causes me to hyperfocus and lose awareness of the world around me. And I'm like, you need a device to do that?
Well, I'm in your camp.
I know.
I'm in your camp. It hits some buttons for me in ways I don't enjoy.
I mean, I get that. There's a games journalist who I'm a big fan of, Patrick Klepek, who loves horror games and loves to be scared. Like why a lot of people like horror games and horror movies. And he's played Resident Evil 7, which is the first-person Resident Evil game, in VR. And he said it was great, but it was terrifying. And he has 2 small children and a wife. And like he could not play it unless everyone in the house was asleep and the pet was locked in a room, because if something touched his, like he'd throw things. Like it was so scary and so immersive. And to me, that sounds like torture, but he talked about it with such reverence. And that's interesting to me, but I don't want to do it. If you want to do it and be scared, go for it. Have fun. No interest.
I have a question for the room. What does your ideal game look like? Like what are its qualities?
Okay, so my ideal game is a puzzle platformer, right? So I have to solve puzzles, but there's also some like jumping and stuff. I'm a short redhead main character that's just pre-generated for me. It's the only choice. Everyone has to be like that. Or maybe there's others, but ideally everyone has to be me. And the puzzles are challenging enough that I have to think about them, but not so hard that I have to look up the answers because I can't figure them out. Oh, and the camera angles are perfect. Every time I turn, it's looking exactly where I want it to turn, not something I have to be like, God damn it, and like move the camera angles. Oh, and the story is interesting too. Sure. And maybe we're collecting pieces of something, right? Like I want to be able to 100% it by knowing I'm collecting all the right things.
Which is the part that knocks Celeste a little out of the running of it being perfect. Because trying to 100% that is look up the solutions hard.
But see, I feel like Celeste is one of those games where you're supposed to die a bunch of times until you figure it out. And so therefore, I'm not super interested in it.
Fair
True.
enough.
For me, I think it's hard. What I find is an ideal game changes so often for me. My favorite game that I talk about all the time is the Mass Effect trilogy, right? But what I love about that game is the story and the characters, and that I can see myself in Shepard. Although ironically, my favorite version of Shepard is FemShep, which was the first Shepard I ever played, and because Jennifer Hale is a god among voice actors. I think what really drives me is an engaging and well-written story. Everything else can be anything else. Like, I just finished Ghost of Tsushima, which was not a game that I looked at and said, I want to play this game. But previous guest of the show, Nathan Brandt, they recommended it, and I fell in love with it. I loved the story. I loved the character development. I loved exploring. It was an open world like Assassin's Creed, and I enjoyed getting the stuff. So I think maybe for me, my ideal game is a well-written and interesting story with diverse characters that I can see myself in the world. I don't have to be me, but I have to be absorbed in the world as if I am the person I'm controlling. And then if there's accessibility options, that's paramount as well. It can be beaten on any difficulty. It has things that help folks who need help to play the game, whatever that means. And it doesn't talk down to you for needing to change the game in any way.
I think something that is important for me in an ideal game, a perfect game, whatever that is, I'm thinking about what are the games I like? What do I really like about them? Part of it is I want there to be discoverable, explorable layers to lore and story and sometimes even absurdity. Not everything has to make sense in the real world. It should make sense to itself. If everything has magic, we'll explore what the magic does. If there's nanomachines, what do the nanomachines do? And maybe there's weird conversations you can have with people. Maybe there's weird descriptions of items that are all in some completely distinct voice. I'm not sure what my ideal game is, but I do enjoy it most when games know what they are and design with that, whether that's the graphics, whether that's the music, whether those the levels of interactivity and the story engagement that is. It doesn't necessarily need to be the hardest game or the easiest game, but it should be, to Matt's point, accessible.
I want a walking sim where, on the accessibility adaptability front, I would love if I could walk through a walking sim. Like, not necessarily in a VR sense, but like if I had the option, depending on how I needed to access the game, of either using a controller to move or strapping like the Ring Fit thing to my leg and walking, always having the option, depending on what my body is capable of, to control it however I needed to. But to make like a walking sim a little bit more physically interactive and to add a few more puzzles. So it's not just finding things, but like unlocking things, and that the puzzle isn't just narrative, but sometimes you actually have to solve something. That's today's answer.
Yeah, because the answer does change, and that's the wonderful thing about gaming. Like, something in a game that you enjoy resonates with you. They don't have to be perfect games. They just have to resonate with you. And there's different narrative needs, and there's different, what I would call arcade-style needs. Like, Sarah Mona, to some of your points, like, course-based platformers like Mario games, where it's like, okay, this is a singular thing. It can be a much larger game, but it's a singular loop. I'm surprised we haven't brought up pinball yet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a totally separate side of my likes. Like, it's like separate from everything else I do in gaming, which is, so my dad was obsessed with pinball growing up. And we had a pinball machine in our house. It was the silver ball machine, for anyone who's interested. And if you Google that backplate, you'll see a lot of very sexual things happening with pinball chrome people that maybe 10-year-old Sarah should not have seen. But, you know, it's fine. We are where we are. And I love virtual pinball, but I like virtual pinball that is something else also. Like, that also has puzzles to solve, things you need to do, where the fact that you're good at pinball is incidental to you having to play the game, which I realize is a little bit elitist because people who aren't good at virtual pinball can't then play the game. But, you know, I think of Mario pinball, Kirby's pinball, Metroid pinball, ones like that, where you have to actually do things. That's what keeps me engaged and involved. And I really also enjoy pinball games for that reason. And obviously real life pinball too.
Real life pinball is just the best. Like, my dad taught me to play pinball. We did not own a machine, but we would take advantage whenever we found them. But pinball and skee ball, and like, I'm not as good at virtual pinball, and I enjoy it. I super enjoy it. But like, when you have to take the pinball along like a course where it's easy to roll off, that always breaks my heart, because if it were an actual pinball game, I would be much more successful at negotiating the space.
Yes. So something I recommend to you, Sarah, what's that thing called, Geoff? Pinball FX3 or something we have on the PS4? You can play actual pinball tables that you know. So I basically just use it to play Medieval Madness. And I play it over and over and over again so that I get better at it for the times when I can go play it on the actual tables. And yes, like, would I love to like tilt the machine just a little to make it not go down the second hole? Like, yes, there is a button that does that, but it's not the same. I can't react the same way I could just like kind of hip check it a little. Right? It's the best. It's like that visceral feeling, but it does a little bit give me the sense of playing those real machines.
Nice.
But the thing I like about the digital pinball that's separate than that, these like games like Yoku's Island Express for the Switch is another good example of it, right? They're games that instead of walking and hitting things, you're using pinball to play the thing. And so it's a totally separate thing from playing a table that you know in pinball. So yeah, no, it's very fun.
That sounds super fun.
It's funny. I like pinball games, but I feel, I'll say, based on the conversation we have, I feel very Sarah Moonin about pinball games, how you feel about other games. Like, if I get a really high score and do really well in a pinball game, and then I lose all my balls, I'm like, well, I don't want to do that again. I did it. I'm done. But that said, and I haven't played a lot of these games, but I love games where pinball is a mechanic to another game. There was a game on the Nintendo called Pinball Quest that I loved, that you actually navigated a story as a pinball, but the ball, like, you were fighting an evil wizard, I think, and like you were going through these different areas, but I was terrible at it. So I needed Game Genie so I could beat it. But I loved the feeling of pinball being the mechanic to a narrative game. But I think that just brings me back to realizing narrative is important to me. No matter how basic or how goofy the narrative is, it's still important to make the game work. But I'm really fascinated to know that there are other pinball games that do something like Pinball Quest. And I've never really explored that. And I think that's really interesting. Although I do remember Metroid Pinball. I think that was that Game Boy Advance or DS?
I think it's DS.
That was DS.
DS. I remember playing that and being like, this is clever. Samus often goes into a ball. Now Samus is the ball. Like that kind of thing. An offshoot of that is I loved Kirby's Dream Course, which was like a golf Kirby game on the SNES, which was hard and a pain in the ass, but I loved.
I haven't played that one. We should definitely play that.
Yeah, I think it's on Switch Online.
It is. I believe it's on the Switch, the Virtual Console.
Can you find me a pinball sim?
Yeah, we could get one on the PS5.
Great.
Because of the fact that my spouse, Sarah Monin, enjoys pinball mechanics in games, I enjoy curating video game recommendations for people in general. And Sarah is one of my favorite people to curate video game recommendations for, which is convenient. And I love finding new, strange pinball games. You need some lists? I got some lists.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, and Pinball Quest is a game that I remember from NES days that we have every pinball game for the NES that I know of, which is only 3. It's Pinball, Pinbot, and Pinball Quest. I do enjoy pinball. I like it. I thought I really liked it, and then Sarah and I started dating. And I realized, oh, you sweet summer child. You still have green on you.
I remember one of our first dates. You took me to a bar in Chelsea and there was a pinball machine. And you were like, oh, I'm going to go get us drinks. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go play pinball. And you like came up real cute behind me, like to whatever. And I hip checked you and was like, excuse you, I'm playing pinball. Out of my way.
That's when I knew.
Yeah, I remember when we went to, I think it was MagFest many years ago. Like I ran into Geoff and I was like, oh, where's Sarah? And Jeff's like, oh, she's playing pinball. We'll see her later. I was like, oh, okay. That and what was it? The police training.
Yes, police trainer. So that was one that my cousins and I were really good at, and we used to love to play all the time. And again, it goes back to that light gun game thing, but that one you could kind of cheat at a little bit because most of them had the plexiglass right up against the screen. So you could kind of just like have the gun on the screen and didn't really need to be trying very hard, but I was still good at it.
Sure.
I got really good when I worked at Jekyll and Hyde. I got pretty okay at Buck Hunter. Again, never held a real gun, would not go hunting unless the world ended and that was what I needed to do for food. But I found it so satisfying to play those in the bar, in the restaurant games.
So speaking of real guns, Geoff's brother is a gun owner and took us to a gun range. And apparently your ability with light guns directly translates to your ability to skeet shoot. I was pretty good. They were like, oh, we'll give you the easy course, blah, blah, blah. Got them all. Like, I was not expecting that. I was kind of like, oh, haha, I'm good at video games, but okay.
That's so interesting. It's like inverse. Like if you're good at playing guitar, stuff like Guitar Hero is really challenging. I think it's interesting that is like opposite.
Yeah. But it doesn't always translate that way. Like I remember a lot of drummers saying the Rock Band drums, though not directly one-to-one for everything, for a lot of songs on expert difficulty, it's pretty close. And I always find that kind of stuff fascinating.
Well, the physical motions, like what your body does, is fairly similar.
Right.
Whereas Guitar Hero, it is the shape of what you're doing, but it's just different enough. It's like sewing with oven mitts on.
That's a great way of putting it.
Although I will say, back to the Dance Dance Revolution things, there has definitely been at least one wedding that Geoff and I have decided to dance as though we're on DDR pads. And, it's just not the same as real dancing.
I can't imagine why. It's just, you would think that would translate.
I mean, the word dance is in the title twice. So it must be real. Yeah, as someone like, we all have something, I think, if as gamers of any level that you just don't get. And DDR is that thing. Like, I watch people do it. I like watching people do it. I like music. I'm a giant music nerd. But like every time I've tried to play it, even on the easy difficulty, I'm just like, this doesn't, legs don't do this. And I think I'm an okay dancer, like in general.
not an expert, but I'd like to think that I can get down at a wedding or two. But like DDR, my brain does not compute in a way. And I don't know why. It's not like I actively hate it. I'm like, this sucks. It's just, I can't make it work with my brain.
I do enjoy DDR.
So how do you feel about other rhythm games?
I love other rhythm games. I mean, I'm obsessed with Fuser. I've been playing it constantly. I love Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and I think it's the fact that it's my legs. I think I'm way more articulate with my hands and my upper body than I am with my legs. Because I find even like doing Ring Fit, which admittedly I've abandoned at this point, but I will hopefully go back to, I find that the upper body workouts are easier for me than the lower body stuff or the leg lifts or anything like that.
I enjoy DDR, but as I'm getting aged, it's this, I also, the Ring Fit, like I can do the upper body stuff and some of the yoga stuff, but some of the jumping and the bending, and it all depends. It's like if there's a creaky middle-aged person setting, I can hang. I enjoy DDR. I enjoy a rhythm game, but it took me a while to figure it out because I was expecting it to be more like regular dancing. And I was like, that's not how you, and I was like, oh, okay. It is not how you do that, but it is how you do it in this game.
I feel like it's important to point out, since we've all been playing Ring Fit, no one is surprised that on every yoga move, they're like, slow down! Stop going so fast, Sarah.
Why?
All the time.
Why are you in a hurry?
There's also like accessibility is like an on-off switch in the game. So it's like I had to turn off the lunge part because my ankles and knees are crappy. I can do it. I just can't go down that low. But then it now wants me to do, I forget, because I've also abandoned Ring Fit. It wanted like a joystick move, or it wanted something totally different. And it was like, I want the ability to tune it. I don't want my only accessibility choices to be either or. But yeah, the slowing down thing is real. And also the light guns do not track to your ability to aim at things with the ring in my limited experience. I'm like, if this were a light gun, I would have gotten a perfect score. But because you're asking me to use these muscles that are like disused and aim that way, what I've realized from Ring Fit is I don't think I'd be a good archer.
Yes, I realized that too. One trick to aiming the Ring Fit thing that I've realized, and as a short human, I don't know where your TV is set up. It's based on where you're standing, not where the TV is. And so that was really hard for me to wrap my head around somehow, right? If I'm aiming straight ahead, it's my straight ahead, not where I see straight ahead on the TV. And I don't know why that was really hard for me to get. But once I figured that out, I was way better at making those air blasts go where I want them to go.
Thank you.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense.
It is. I will say this for Ring Fit. It is tough. It is definitely full body engagement.
Yeah.
If you make the difficulty high enough, I'm staying right around 15 because I don't want to be too sore, but it's getting me moving, and that is good enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great idea, and it was the most I've been engaged with an exercise-based game or gamification of exercise at all than anything else. I think mostly we abandoned it because 2020 was 2020, but I think it's well developed. I really liked interacting with it when I was doing it.
We got it, I think, 3 to 6 weeks before the fire.
Correct.
Maybe 3.
Oh my gosh.
We took it when we were allowed back into the apartment that night for a few things. I was like, take the Ring Fit. I'm going to have to move my body.
Yeah.
But then we were living in a hotel.
Yeah.
And it was just too depressing.
Yeah.
And by the time we got into this apartment, I think I completely like devolved into fuck it mode. And like, I don't know that I think I did it once from here. I did it once here. I got a workout system. It's not a video game. It's a physical workout system, but like all the classes are either on an app or on Zoom. And it's not unlike video games, except that it can't track your mechanics. Like either there's a live teacher going, or you're just doing your best.
I don't know. The thing about Ring Fit for me is that the exercise is incidental. It's the same thing as, swinging Link's sword and holding it skyward.
Right.
I'm interested in beating the monsters and playing the game. I have basically zero interest in the exercise, but it's like forcing me to exercise to beat the game. So it's working out. And one more thing, if you didn't think DDR was dance-like enough, I have Just Dance 2019. I think they've come out with 2020 and maybe even 2021 since, but like...
Most likely, yeah.
That is an actual dance game. You have to do real dance moves but it only tracks your right hand. So if it's doing a dance move you can't do, your right hand can do that dance move and you can adjust it the way that you want to.
Interesting.
And so because again, that's all it is. You're holding the right Joy-Con in your hand. And so, you know, there's a move where you have to kick out front and then like move your arm back and forth. Okay, if you can't kick out front because you have a weak ankle, you can move your arm back and forth and still get the full points.
That sounds great.
That's cool.
My follow-on question is there currently a game where I could attach the Joy-Con to my hand so that it doesn't fly out and like destroy the television, where I could like I miss stage combat. I would really like a game that made me do like drills, like sword drills.
I want that. I don't know.
There isn't.
I don't know that there is, but this is a $1 million idea. Let's talk to some developers and get on this.
Oh, God,
let's call Tim.
You've made me so sad and excited at the same time.
Because think if you had your two Joy-Cons, you could do epee, you could do rapier dagger, and like operating on the principles of like resistance band workouts and like strength training. That's all just your own body. You could totally. It'd be so much fun. If we're gonna have to be in our houses for 2020, 2021 as well, which with this vaccine rollout, I can't go outside. Anyway, I want that.
I don't think that exists, but we do have listeners who have access to the internet. Rob Sturobin, I know you're out there. Correct us. Let us know if you found it.
And if it doesn't exist, Team Fun and Games, let's build it.
Yeah, exactly. Can it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that to step back to what Sarah Moon and I were talking about a second ago with the physical stuff, like some of the stuff on the Wii I did like. I think for me, it's if I'm playing Zelda Skyward Sword and I'm not getting the movements right, and so the game is punishing me for not getting the movement right, then it gets frustrating, which didn't always happen, especially once you had the Wii Motion Plus, but it can happen in some of the motion control games. And I think that's where I feel like I'm in more control when I'm just pressing a button, which isn't always the case. But this combat training idea sounds really good. And Just Dance, I didn't realize was just the hand thing. I thought it was.
On the Switch it is.
That piques my interest, so thank you.
Yes, and apparently there's a thing where you could subscribe to like many more songs, but again, back to the liking to be good at stuff. I don't care that there's only 30 songs. I want to be really great at those 30 songs.
That's legit.
I am like through life like I aspire to be A+. I'm super type A. But like when I don't want to put that much effort in, I'm a B+, A- kind of gal. So like when I'm playing games, I'm like, did I get through it? Okay. Like I'm so the opposite of that. It's like I like to be really good at the stuff that I want to be really good at, and the rest of it I'm like, did I die? No. Sweet.
I would think part of it also with games now is that there's less win or lose. Like it does still exist, but there are tons of games where even if you lose over and over again, or even like you can still get through games, even if you're having trouble with it or you're not the best at it. And like, I want to be good at the games I'm playing, but I have no shame in switching it to easy if I am hitting a wall. And games that don't let me do that, like Dark Souls, which we mentioned earlier, I don't want to play.
What is Dark Souls?
It's an action combat game that's really immersive, but it's punishingly difficult and you can't make it easier.
And there's a whole genre of games that are Souls-like games, right? And so they
that are that difficult.
Yeah, it's a lot less about getting experience points in the game and putting those towards new skills for your character, and more about there are dodge rolls and like the combat has all sorts of timing intricacies that your character doesn't get better, you get better. And it's built into the game where, you're gonna lose at this a bunch and you're gonna learn how to do it. And that is for a certain kind of gamer, a certain kind of person. Like, we are all here. The four of us are all dedicated people in our way, and we do like to be good at things. It just doesn't click with us, but there are others where that's the get good that they want.
Ooh.
That's so interesting.
I just remembered something I haven't talked about at all yet that is kind of in this vein, which is RPGs. Like we haven't really talked about like JRPGs and like turn-based stuff. Something about being really good at these games and those kinds of things. Pokemon is the worst JRPG for me because it has 1 billion characters. I think another perfect game for me is a JRPG that is just the characters in your party, no one else. They do all the things. They pick up items that are just for them and a little bit better than the one you just had. And the story's really, really interesting.
What is a JRPG?
So a Japanese role-playing game typically tends to be like turn-based games like your Final Fantasies or
and a Western
Chrono
RPG
Trigger.
would be more like Fallout.
Right, where it's more open and reactive.
Got it.
Yes, but so this is why the Paper Mario games are so perfect for me, because you're only ever Mario and Luigi and young Mario and Luigi, depending on the game. And like, you don't have to pick your people, change them out and do different things. As Geoff and I are playing through some of these Final Fantasy games, there are all these people, and I suspect that they're similar to the people who really like the Dark Souls and those kind of games, who want to optimize everything. You put these 7 items on this person and you take away these stats and they only do this one thing, and the min-maxing and those kind of things. And I don't like that in my D&D. I don't like that in my RPGs.
Yeah, min-maxing is not something I love either. Like, my favorite thing, like I said before, my favorite thing about Mass Effect is the story and Shepard and the characters, less the new gun, the better gear, the mod for the weapon. I'll do that stuff, and I try to do it the best of my ability, but if a game punishes you for not having the best gear and the best stats, I will bounce off of those
Which
games.
a lot of online gaming kind of tends towards, because that's a race to the bottom that is a race to the top.
I know I disparage watching people play through things, but are there playthroughs that are just the cutscenes and only enough of the interstitial stuff to get you from point A to point B?
Absolutely, on YouTube, for sure. I'm sure someone's collected that for any given game.
And there's plenty of games that even have like a story mode that are much less about doing whatever the gameplay is and more about experiencing the story.
That's my jam, right? It's like, I'm there. When I say I like mechanics, I like the mechanics of narrative games especially. I'm interested in how the turn taking happens and like if you decide what to say, what happens next. But even when I tried to play Mass Effect, the first one, I was playing on the easiest mode available, and I still had to come in. You still had to come in and like help me with the shooting.
Well, that's because Mass Effect notoriously has one of the worst combat systems of the 3 games. 2 and 3's story modes are more manageable. They give you more health. The aiming's easier. That's an infamous problem with Mass Effect 1 specifically.
They should fix that in the remastered version.
They should.
Do you think they will?
No.
I really want to play it.
I know.
Do you think they'll do the comic book so you can skip the first game?
Supposedly it comes with all the DLC, so I don't know. They haven't actually given us a rundown of what will be included in that remaster because video games. We're going to keep it a secret for as long as possible.
That is a thing that I like. The Mass Effect mechanics are a thing that I love in theory about games. I say in theory because I haven't played it, right?
Right.
The idea that you can play an entire series of games and what you did the first time affects everything after. That's a fabulous mechanic, which is lifted directly from like a long-term D&D campaign, right? Like the choices that you made.
I mean, it's not
lifted.
I mean, technically, but it's Mass Effect was, as far as I know, one of the first games to do something like that. Dragon Age also does it, except it's not directly the same character, but it is the same persistent world.
Butterfly effect. That's fun.
But it's not done in a lot of games. Geoff and I have talked about that before. It seems like a no-brainer, right? I guess part of the problem is Mass Effect and Dragon Age, BioWare went into those games going, this is how we want to tell the story, and we're going to plan to do this. Whereas a lot of modern AAA games, I don't think come out going, we're going to have a sequel right after this. It depends on how successful they are and how they sell. And so I think that's maybe why games are less inclined to do that. But I agree. I think it's one of my favorite storytelling mechanics.
You have to decide going in, are you writing The Hobbit or are you writing Lord of the Rings? Because like if you're only doing one, then you
they made The Hobbit a trilogy, so I don't know what to tell you.
What?
Yeah, the movies were a trilogy.
Oh, right. But no, I was talking about
I know.
I know. I wanted to double check. I was looking something up. The oldest instance I can think of like things carrying over, and speaking of like long form D&D, is the Wizardry series of RPGs from the 80s, where some of those games you could take your old character or your old save from one and bring them into the next game and the next adventure. I think one of them even had a class you couldn't play in one game. You had to beat the game and unlock the Paladin. And I don't know if it was a New Game Plus or if it was now you can play a Paladin in Wizardry 4 because of what you did in Wizardry 3. Like,
nice.
Yeah, and maybe that's because more crunchy numbers, but yeah, I'm with you on this. We need more of this kind of ludonarrative.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And hearing that for whatever reason, hearing the 80s maybe unlocked for me. I don't know if this happened before we got the NES or around the same time, but in the library, in like middle school, the public library, I could play the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy games. And I had
the text adventure?
I could never get past so here's how Sarah did not understand. I was looking for a walking sim even then, and I did not know it because I knew the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy very well. And so when I was tasked with doing things, I did things like if I couldn't get Ford to lay down in front of the bulldozer, I did, and I would inevitably die. And then I would talk back to the game because I'd be trying to interact and be like, this is terrible, like tell me how to do this. And it would just yell at me because corpses can't talk. Or they couldn't in that game at that time. Has anybody here ever gotten further than your own front yard in that game?
I've never played it.
I have not even left the house. It was intentionally obtuse. It was Douglas Adams having a go at us. And I know that. And it still is like, I feel like it's my cartoon rival. Just like, I don't want to look up the solutions to all of this, but I swear to God.
It was so hard. And I was so bummed that like you couldn't just follow the path of the book.
It's right there. Also, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is rather infamous for Douglas Adams wrote it like 6 times and the story was different every time. It was originally the radio series, and then he wrote the novels, which differed from the radio series, and then there was the TV adaptation.
Well, if we're going to talk about like exploiting your own IP, he does it right.
He does.
In my opinion, there's 2 ways to exploit an IP like that. Either you explore the world in a different way every time you spin it out into a different property, or you never tell the same story twice, even though you're always telling the same story.
And given how many sequels many video game franchises have, those are good
for
lessons.
sure.
This thought is also brought to you by the fact that I was really like, when I watched Homecoming, I was like, this is the podcast with visuals. And I was like so perplexed.
I mean, I think that's why I like the Dragon Age series now that I've finally played all 3 games in it, is that the thing it does differently than Mass Effect that I like is it's the same world, but it's different stories in that same world, and those stories affect each other. Whereas Mass Effect, you're one character moving through the stories. And I think that is something comparable to like if you're going to tell the same story, tell it differently in different ways.
It's the folk process. It's the telephone game. If you tell the story to somebody else, it will inevitably change. And it should. Because this is not the truth.
Never objective.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you both to share a video game story that really stands out to you. I know we've talked about some on the podcast, but maybe one thing about video gaming that maybe stays at the forefront of your mind just because of how you experienced it. Like for me, how I learned that spoilers don't always ruin everything. And that with the game Undertale specifically, having the punchline spoiled made me more curious of the process to get to it. And that made me actually play the game, whereas otherwise I might have ignored it. And now Undertale has become one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And it doesn't have to be that. It could be just a fun story about a way you engaged with the game. But that's just something I've been thinking about because I also was on a podcast talking about Undertale recently.
A favorite for me is, and especially pertaining to all of us being here, was the first time I played Paper Mario, because we've mentioned several times that I love sharing games that I love with Sarah, especially the way that our gaming dynamic is. I can watch her play, and this is fine. Paper Mario is one of Sarah's favorites, and she wanted me to play it. I'd play Super Mario RPG, but never Paper Mario, and she wanted me to play it, but didn't necessarily want to sit and watch me play it. So what we ended up doing was sitting together, and we were both holding the N64 controller. Just the way like intertwining or whatever, like being that close to each other was. I'm pretty sure I controlled the joystick and you controlled the buttons.
Yeah, I was hitting the action buttons, yeah.
Some of the platforming sections would be like, okay, you can play for a minute. Like all by yourself, please coordinate that. Because the amount of team building exercise of, okay, jump now, was, we didn't need that. This wasn't a challenge. This was just how we experienced the game together. And then the next few Paper Mario games, we did the same thing. And played some of the stuff by myself, and I do love the series and delight in it. But that is a wonderful gaming moment or series of moments to me.
I guess if we're being sappy and telling stories like that, have you told the Million Roses story on this podcast before?
I have not.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So apologies. Also, disclaimer, I don't listen to podcasts. I'm so sorry. I don't know what your backlog talks about. Anybody who has played the game We Heart Katamari on the PlayStation 2 will tell you that after you beat the game, the king of all cosmos, the ridiculous character, says, all right, now I want you to roll up 1,000,000 roses for me. And you can only roll them up in 1 or 10 bunches, and you never get bigger. In the game Katamari, you typically get bigger the more things you roll up. So you roll up a stapler, and then you roll up a table, and then you roll up the house, things like that. You just keep getting bigger. This one, you don't get bigger. So back when Geoff and I were just friends in high school, just trying to kill time with a bunch of our friends, we rolled up, like 350,000 roses or so.
Something like that. It saves your progress. You can stop for today and you have this many roses.
Yeah, and kept going. Then, fast forward to years later when we're dating, and Geoff says to me, I probably would never propose to you until we roll up all 1,000,000 roses. And I just look at him and I'm like, are you kidding me? And Geoff says to me, is this the thing you really want to test me on? Because, you can. So over the years together, we end up rolling up close to 1,000,000 roses. And in December of 2013, it comes up on my Facebook memories every year, we rolled up the 1,000,000th rose. And within 2 weeks, Geoff proposed to me. And am I saying that the two are related? Yes, but not in the way that you think. Because as we knew that this was something that we wanted in our lives, we spent more time and put more effort and energy into rolling up the roses. And it was kind of like a really nice sign that we were both ready for this and both interested in moving our relationship to the next level by rolling up 1,000,000 goddamn roses. And that is why my bouquet at our wedding and all the flowers were made of paper to look like the PS2 rendered roses from We Heart Katamari.
That's amazing.
That's
I
the
love
best.
that. I love
That's
that
an
story
incredible
so
story.
much.
I can't believe you never told it before. It's such a good story.
It is, but it needs the both of us.
There's a context story there.
Yeah.
Aw.
I don't know that I have. I will say West of Loathing and What Became of Edith Finch taught me that there's something for everyone. And I had played Kingdom of Loathing online a little bit when it was new. West of Loathing proved to me that if I just wanted to experience mechanics and ridiculousness, there was a game for that. And What Became of Edith Finch proved to me that video games could be as narratively compelling as a television show or a film, and could also be just the right amount of scary. And there's no resource management in What Became of Edith Finch. And there's not really much narrative in West of Loathing, but they feel to me like separate sides of the same coin, because you are just walking through these spaces and dealing with what comes next for you. I don't know that that's quite the moment you were looking for, but those are.
I wasn't looking for a specific. I was looking for you to give us a moment.
So those are
did.
the sort of two sides of the same coin of what I love most about video games. Is you can scratch the itch and enjoy how ridiculous something is, or you can completely give over to the art of it and be completely emotionally affected and frankly devastated.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. I love when I can start a game and go, all right, mess me up. Let's go.
Oh my God, Gone Home really screwed with me.
Yeah, that's a good one too. A really brief gaming moment. Because Sarah doesn't play a ton of games with me, whenever I find a game that hits the serotonin for her, it makes, same way, Geoff, you like recommending stuff for Sarah Moonen. When the Scott Pilgrim game first came out, which recently got a re-release, which made me so happy, the elation that Sarah could be a badass femme type and kick the crap out of jerks in the streets was so fun for her. And we had so much fun playing that beat 'em up and some others. And then very recently, really recently, in the game Miles Morales, I guess this is a minor story spoiler, but it's in the videos for the game. There's a cat named Spider-Man that a bodega owner owns. And at one point, the cat goes missing and you bring him back and he's really grateful. And the bodega owner's like, you're a pretty good Spider-Man also. Later in the game, you can unlock a costume where that cat wears a little Spider-Man mask and rides in your backpack. And there are quick time events in the game where Miles will do these cool little cinematic actions to finish off a combo. When you have that costume on, and when I first saw this, I ran to Sarah and I was like, Sarah, I have to show you something because we love a good, cute animal. If you do any of the finishers in that costume, the cat also does a finisher. So like Miles has venom powers where he can shock people. There's one where he like jumps up and shocks the enemy below him. As he's doing that, the cat climbs out of the backpack and scratches the bad guy as well as you're finishing them off. And so I had to show her immediately, and it was just such a joyful moment.
It was fabulous.
It was very good.
I also just really enjoy, nothing has made me as homesick for Manhattan as Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Mm-hmm.
We've only played through the first one, and the fact that our neck of the woods isn't rendered, I've made my peace.
I'm still getting there.
I haven't played it. I've just watched Matt like swing through places. Our neighborhoods have never been rendered, but like he can swing through places where I've worked, and I'm like, oh.
So my work has an Argentina office, and a bunch of them came to visit, well, I guess like 2 years ago now. And it was after the first Spider-Man game had come out, and they were asking me if I could like take them around to some of the places that they saw, and if I could like, if it was possible to find our office building in Spider-Man. And I was like, yes, it actually is. I can show you because it's at the corner of yes. And so even from not being from here, I think that there is something really, really cool about the way it builds the city. And I've definitely had nostalgia for it playing these games when we can't go out in the city.
Here's a thing from a game I've never played and will probably never play that I appreciate. And that is that after, it was Notre Dame, right, that burned. The fact that they had done such detailed renders for Assassin's Creed and basically had 3D interactive blueprints of the entire thing. Like, there's a thing that will benefit everyone in the surrounding community and everyone for whom that is an important like faith-based place or tourist place. The reconstruction using those models would never have been possible if somebody hadn't wanted to create a really realistic rendering of an actual city, like for a video game. And that to me is kind of cool.
It is. I had something similar. I mean, it's not quite the same, but in Assassin's Creed, when I went to the Library of Alexandria the first time and it opened up and I was like, I am in the Library of Alexandria. And like, it's not quite the same, obviously, but like just getting to go to historical places based on notes and renderings that we have from then too, right? When people do their homework, it's amazing.
This is why, like, I think I'm so unforgiving when representation sucks or when people are lazy or whitewash history. It's like, you have to do your homework. The homework is there to be done. Either do something super fantastical where nobody can say this isn't accurate, or give over to the fact that people who care about the details or even the less obvious or more obvious details will catch you.
They increase the experience. They enhance the ludonarrative.
Ludonarrative is a term I'm not familiar with.
Ludonarrative is narrative told through experience or through play. That's a little inaccurate, but often when talking about the way you play a game or interacting with the medium also informs the story or fulfills all of that, that is ludonarrative.
Where does that term come from, and is it related in any way to Ludo and Labyrinth?
I think so, because I think Ludo means to play. Because I first heard it in terms of describing ludonarrative dissonance.
Yeah.
The idea where you watch a cutscene where your character does the most badass thing possible, and then you can't do any of it. Or vice versa, you've defeated a boss using all of your amazing skills and things like that, but because a cutscene's happening or the story requires it, you get like one-shotted by someone who snuck up on you. Ludonarrative is a compound of ludology and narrative. So ludology is, the study of games, the act of playing them, and players and culture surrounding it.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry, I'm just having a moment recognizing that the people who made Labyrinth really also did their homework back in the mid to early 80s.
Right? It's so wonderful. And you know what? It's funny because like what we've been talking about, like I think that's why a game like Assassin's Creed is so frustrating to me. They could do their homework enough to make these wonderful, beautiful scale 3D models and know that, but it's too difficult to animate a woman because she has to shake her ass every time she moves. Like that just makes me angry. Because if you're gonna do
then
your homework,
they just Ubisoft it.
Yeah, we know you can do it. We know you have the ability to do these things. You're not making stick figures. Come on.
That's why I'm grateful that at least in Odyssey, they made a male and female character. And even in the new one, Valhalla, like they they realized they were idiots and actually tried to own up for it by making it more inclusive. Whether it is or not, I haven't played those games, so I can't speak to it, but at least
baby steps.
They tried.
It's a failure of imagination in the most disheartening way possible. It's like, especially when we can see how imaginative those teams and those creators and those C-suite executives are. It's like, if you're that imaginative, but the mechanics of a woman's glutes, or like, I'm trying to find a more sort of gender inclusive way to say it. Like, if some bodies are more easy for you to animate than others, like that's a failure of imagination, or like a weird phobia or fear of like body types that aren't your own. And that just seems, if the whole business is imagination, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
I would much rather there be smaller scope in games so you can get that more of that homework done. There's a big thing going around now, kind of pushing back against the crunch of AAA titles, where it's like, I want shorter games with worse graphics. If making sure every individual blade of grass moves efficiently is causing horrible working conditions, I don't want it. And I joked that I've made my peace with the PS4 Spider-Man doesn't have most of Upper Manhattan. You know what? If it means that what they show of Manhattan is deep, is you can find those buildings, is you can do that, that's what I want. To do otherwise is capitalism stifling imagination.
Question. I know we're about to wrap up, but question. So every time somebody's building a new series, are they rebuilding the engine? Like, do game companies have a central engine? Because you can automate so many processes. I wonder, like, where's the breakdown?
So the answer is there are different game engines that lots of companies use. Some use their own engine that they've made from scratch. And then there's the Unreal Engine, which a lot of game developers use.
Build a lot of 3D games these days. And there's also a lot of algorithmic stuff that happens. One of the very interesting things that I'm finding in getting more and more into PC gaming is the modding community. When people who just love these games with no propulsion from making money on it create things to enhance the gaming experience. Some of it's really goofy.
Is that homebrew?
It's a little bit of homebrew. It's a little bit of like, here's a program that you can run with like almost a patch on a game. Like, it can be as silly as replacing every dragon in Skyrim with Thomas the Tank Engine. And you replace all of the roars with train whistles. If you want to just...
This actually exists, by the way.
This actually exists. If you want to enjoy yourself, you can go on YouTube and watch the entire opening cinematic. The whole, hey, you're finally awake. The whole thing, like, to the execution block before the dragon comes in. And you just hear the train whistle. And Thomas the Tank Engine flies in. And everyone reacts the same way. It's incredible. And on the flip side of things, one of my favorite games, Final Fantasy VII, has a very deep PC modding community because people have programs or there's technology that will algorithmically upscale images to HD levels. So the old pre-rendered graphics that were like such amazing art on the PS1 when the resolution was 240 pixels wide, they've upscaled it very efficiently and fairly well to HD. So there are all of these big and little things that, yes, you can choose to build these things from scratch, but the tech is out there. The technology is out there. The tools exist. And much like how Star Trek inspires technology, all of us working together, it gets better and better.
I want to take a moment to thank both of you for coming on the show, our 100th episode. I've told many a time on this podcast, probably at the point of it being partially fictionized or like elaborated on, that the reason this podcast exists is because one of the first times we all hung out as couples to hang out and just be together, Geoff and I walked off and talked about video games for hours, and Sarah Moonen said, why don't you guys just start a podcast? Like something to that degree. And it just proving further that we are better for having both of you in our lives. So thank you.
Aww.
Thanks for saying that.
Sure. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Thanks for inviting us on. It was fun.
This has been a lot of fun. You could absolutely not want to be found on the internet, but if you do want to be found on the internet, is there anywhere you would like people to go to or check out anything?
It depends on what you're looking for. I have a website that needs updating. Everything is I Am Sarah Storm, possibly including Clubhouse. I think I Am Sarah Storm everywhere.
Okay.
I'm private on the internet, so you're not going to find me. But if you need me, you can reach me through Geoff, which is actually ironic to say because people who know us in life know that you reach him through me. But Publicly, that'll
It's
work.
balance. It's a
Yeah,
partnership.
you won't find me unless you know me in real life. I don't think you'll find me on Facebook unless you find a fan page, and that's by design. Twitter is just me noodling about anything that comes into my head, and Instagram is the things I cook.
There you go. Well, again, thank you for both coming on the show. This was a delight for me for an endless amount of reasons, but it seemed like the perfect way to cap off 100 episodes of this podcast. So why don't we wrap up by doing our usual housekeeping? Of course, thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here for 100 episodes. It's kind of unbelievable that we've done it. We've technically done more than 100 episodes because there were episodes that were unnumbered, but I won't go there. If you want to find out more from us, you can, of course, find us on all forms of social media. We are at Fun and Games Pod just about everywhere. You can also go to certainpov.com, where a ton of other really nerdy, great podcasts are, and a permanent invite link to our Discord server where you can engage in the conversation. And I promise to pass along messages of loves, likes, and commonality to the Sarahs if you have things that you would like to talk about.
If anything that we've talked about today has sparked something for you, please let us know. This has been such an absolute joy for myself and for Matt to have made 100+ episodes. We are looking forward to sharing so many more conversations with you, whether through all of those social media or guests that we have here on the show. It has felt so wonderful for our 100th numbered episode, to kind of bring it back to the conversation that sparked this in the first place. And I, for one, am ecstatic to see where this conversation goes, because this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
So, I have a question. Have you ever wanted to get into comics, but you just didn't know where to start? Well, welcome to Comics Quest. I'm JD Martin, and every week I sit down with a guest to talk a comic that I think anybody can pick up and start their comics reading journey. We take a look at psychedelic sci-fi, fantastical action, heart-wrenching love stories, and of course, superheroes. So check us out at certainpov.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.